Fox News alert out of Washington, where the Obama administration is now facing increasing questions about what the White House knew and when it knew it when it comes to the IRS's targeting of conservative groups seeking tax-exempt status. Welcome to America Live, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. A White House news briefing is about to get underway. The press secretary, Jay Carney, expected to be grilled after repeatedly changing his story. The White House now admits that not only did its senior staff know about this damning IG report prior to the date they previously revealed, but they actually consulted with the Treasury Department, which oversees the IRS, on the strategy for how this would be unveiled and told to the public. When White House Press Secretary Jay Carney originally commented on this matter back on Monday, May 13th, he was asked if anyone at the White House was aware of the IRS's actions, and he said, quote, "No. My understanding is that the White House counsel's office was alerted in the week of April 22nd of this year, only about the fact that the IG was finishing a review about matters involving the office in Cincinnati. But that's all they were informed," as a sort of normal heads up. And we don't have access to, nor should we, the IG's report or any draft versions of it. All right, that's all we were informed. They're doing some review of the office in Cincinnati. That's it. But a week later, as reporters dug deeper, Carney admitted that not only did the White House counsel know about the IG report prior to its public release, so did the White House chief of staff. So did senior staffers at the White House. Still, they maintain the president I should say, was never told prior to seeing it on the news. Then yesterday, Press Secretary Jay Carney comes out and he reveals that not only did the White House counsel's office, the chief of staff, and senior staffers at the White House all know about that IG report well prior to news reports about it, but they had actually been coordinating with the IRS about the strategy for how to reveal it to the public and discuss the fact that it would say the IRS had been systematically targeting conservative groups. So we go from all they did was give the White House counsel's office just a heads up, and that's it. That something about Cincinnati was going to break, to we knew, chief of staff knew, senior staffers knew, coordination between the White House and Treasury on how it would be rolled out. Do we have Lois Lerner make a speech? No, that's maybe not the best way. Wound up going with Lois Lerner plants a question at some American Bar Association event, and then the world would find out from there. Chris Direwalt is our Fox News digital politics editor and host of Power Play on FoxNews.com Live. I mean, Jay Carney says, look, I'm revealing information to you as it comes to me. And Dana Perino was on this program not long ago saying someone is not well serving Mr. Carney. She was talking about Benghazi, saying who would let him get that far out ahead of his skis when the facts would completely underlie everything he was telling us about those talking points. And now here we have him. That was it. All they told us was that all we knew was the White House counsel had been informed IG report coming out. And now it's she knew, chief of staff knew, senior staffers knew. Not only did they know, coordinating with Treasury and how it would be rolled out, in what fashion, what worked best, how it could be sort of, molded. I mean, how are we supposed to trust what comes out of this administration and what Jay Carney's about to tell us in moments from now when this is how information is revealed?
Well, look, to Dana Perino's point, he is being poorly served because they are keeping him out of the loop. He is being perhaps given willful misinformation. I don't know what, but his credibility is at a very low ebb right now. And he's got to remember, of course, that he has a life and a career that will go on beyond this moment and this time. And he lives in this town and has colleagues here, and he can only be embarrassed by the White House so many times. That's the rule for a press secretary, is you get a couple. Hey, they didn't tell me, guys. I'm sorry, I was out of the loop. But this isn't just this one. This is Benghazi, as you pointed out, and the willful shading of public releases on this for political purposes. So he had to go back on that. Then there's all this IRS stuff, which has just been a concatenation of errors and contradictions.
God bless you.
Well, it has been.
I don't know that word. It sounds fancy.
It's a lot in succession. That you have that where you have the stories changing, and every time it changes, it gets worse. And then you have them going, the Department of Justice targeting reporters, including our friend and colleague James Rosen, with these incredibly heavy-handed tactics. These are all three things that relate to the administration's credibility as to dealing with the press, talking to the press, and Jay Carney right there is like standing at the Greyhound bus depot seeing who's going to back one over him next.
Mm-hmm. And now it's not just Carney, because you've got the Inspector General, the Treasury head, Jack Lew, coming out, and originally he said, I only learned about the IG investigation from the news reports. He's like President Obama. He learned it from cable news. The head of Treasury, okay, because that IRS is under Treasury. I learned about it from the news. Then he admitted in testimony last week, maybe I learned about it in March. Maybe not in May, along with the general public. Maybe it was actually March when the Inspector General sat down and had a meeting with me about the report. And then the Inspector General testified himself, Mr. George testified, actually, I didn't meet with Mr. Lew, but I met with senior officials at Treasury, including the Deputy Secretary and the General Counsel, and told them about this last spring prior to the election. Believe me, it wasn't just me, Mr. George, out there doing this report. I let my superiors at Treasury know. And so you got Lew saying, what? I don't know anything about it. President Obama, what? I didn't know anything about it. Carney saying, no one at the White House except for White House counsel. Oh, wait, and the chief of staff. Oh, wait, and senior staffers. Oh, but they only knew about oh, no, actually, they coordinated with Treasury. But, it's a credibility issue. It is a credibility issue because now they come out and they want us to believe other things. Like, we didn't know about DOJ targeting James Rosen or targeting the Associated Press. And we didn't know about, demands for increased security in Benghazi prior to the terrorist attack on our consulate there. And there is supposed to be some trust between the American people and their government.
This administration is way out of its depth now, and all of these stories and all of these contradictions. And one thing on the Jack Lew thing, you and I talked a long time ago about the dangers of putting a political person in at Treasury. That hasn't been the case since the 30s, and throughout history, generally, it has not been a political person like Jack Lew, the former White House chief of staff, former congressional aide, et cetera, but generally somebody from the financial world or somebody like that. One of the reasons is we like Treasury to be squeaky clean. They've got the money, they're doing all this stuff. They got the G-men. We like all of that stuff. Putting a political figure, a partisan, a hardline partisan, some would say, in at Treasury was always a questionable move. But now that you see the Treasury embroiled in this scandal and all of this hideous partial disclosure followed by a reversal and all of that stuff, you start to see why maybe all of President Obama's predecessors, back to Frank Roosevelt, had a different idea about Treasury.
Well, and you know what else? It's hurting them. I don't know if this is directly tied, but look at the polls. It's the latest poll questions whether people believe the Obama administration was involved in the IRS targeting of conservative groups. Were they involved? 37% said they knew it. They may not have initiated it, but they knew all about it. 29% said not only did they know about it, they were behind the operation. And so if my math is correct, that's 66% of the American people who believe that they either knew about it or orchestrated in it, and just 24% say they weren't involved at all. The people are not buying it, Chris. I'll give you the last word.
And in that same poll, Megan, there was asked the question about, do you believe that the government is, your civil liberties, personal liberties are at risk from the federal government? Yeah, it was like 2-1. Americans are very concerned about what's going on. And if they can't stop the bleeding and they can't start speaking with authority and quit backtracking and double backing, they're going to be in this crisis of confidence will only deepen.
Mm-hmm. And we'll see. We'll see what Jay Carney says when he comes to the microphone today and what today's version of the story will be. Chris, thank you.
You bet.
Well, today the House tried to get to the bottom of the IRS controversy. One of the things that the White House and Treasury, which oversees IRS, one of the things they were talking about before they told the world about all of this was how are we going to tell them this isn't good, what the Inspector General found. And the woman at the center of this case, in part, one of the people, is Lois Lerner. Now, she was in charge of that IRS group that oversees applications for tax-exempt status. It was the people who worked for her. And maybe her as well, we don't know. Maybe she as well was doing it. that were doing this to conservative groups. So finally and by the way, this is the person who testified before the House Ways and Means Committee on May 8th, which is a Wednesday, and they asked her about this. What about that conservative targeting? Was that? And she didn't, nothing. What? Huh? No, don't know. No. 2 days later, she's the one who plants the question with the reporter and says, oh, it's all true and we apologize for it. So Congress is ticked off. And one Democrat is saying she needs to be fired. So she gets called before a different committee today, House Oversight, that's ICE's committee, and made a very brief statement before deciding to plead the fifth, asserting her right to not incriminate herself. And then she flat out refused to answer any more questions.
I have not done anything wrong. I have not broken any laws. I have not violated any IRS rules or regulations, and I have not provided false information to this or any other congressional committee. After very careful consideration, I have decided to follow my counsel's advice and not testify or answer any of the questions today.
Well, after a wild back and forth between Ms. Lerner and lawmakers, one of whom argued that she had just waived her right to her Fifth Amendment privilege by issuing an opening statement and making other comments, Ms. Lerner was ultimately dismissed and quickly walked out of the room. In just a few moments, we will speak to one of the lawmakers who wanted to question Ms. Lerner about the spectacle we saw this morning.